make sure you're going to places that are going to get you exposed to project management, that are going to get you involved in green committee meetings, that are going to get you involved and not just filling out tasks, but you're actually exposed to things beyond just what's right in front of you. Because when you can speak on that pretty confidently, it shows in an interview. And the committee feels it. I mean, the committees are pretty much in sync by the end to say, we're talking to a master, not somebody who's trying to become the master. They already are the master of what they're doing.
Welcome to Leadership on the Links, the podcast that showcases innovators in golf course management and the issues they face. I'm your host, Tyler Bloom. In Leadership on the Links, you hear the stories of people shaping the industry from their first swing to their dream match. You feel like you're on the course playing with your most inspiring colleagues, having great conversations, digging into insights and sharing a few laughs. Our industry is changing. As a leader, you need to keep up on everything from trends to technology to best practices. Together, we'll continue to build world-class clubs and teams. Let's get to it. Enjoy.
Thanks a lot, Ryan, and appreciate the opportunity here to give a different perspective from some of our previous webinars that we've had. And just for a quick introduction, I want to introduce Mr. Bill Langley first, who recently retired, being general manager, CEO at the club at Quail Ridge after a decorated 20 plus years, maybe 30 plus years, and served in a variety of different capacities. And Mr. Langley, thanks a lot for joining us. Anything I missed there?
No, I think you did good. You made me sound younger. 40 years in the club business. So
Great. And it has been at a number of different clubs, whether Texas, the Carolinas, all the way down into Florida. So excited to get your perspectives today, having worked side by side with superintendents and directors of agronomy as well.
Sure.
And then certainly last but not least, Mr. Clark Jones, who has been had a decorated career serving as a volunteer member, but also as Greens chairman, I believe, at two pretty prominent clubs, the Country Club in Cleveland, Ohio, as well as Gulfstream Golf Club just outside of West Palm Beach. So Mr. Jones, thanks for joining us, and we'll get you off mute.
Yeah, no, great to be here, and appreciate you asking me, and look forward to a nice discussion, whichever way you want to take it. So thank you.
Great. Well, I will start off with Mr. Langley. So when you think about relationships with the golf course superintendent throughout your career, right, what were some of the most effective relationships that you've seen, and sort of what you see in the industry as well between the general manager and the golf course superintendent?
Well, I think, early on in my career, maybe I didn't recognize how important it was to have that relationship. Everybody, as a first-time GM, my buddies in their own silos, and you do your own thing. Over the years, you learn and you grow, and you learn that you've got to be one team, one organization. And it became very apparent with the golf course being our single largest asset in many cases. Either that or the clubhouse. But with your golf course as your single largest asset, and with Quail Ridge, two golf courses that we had spent a lot of money on, it's pretty important to our members that we get that right. And so I think the chief operating officer, general manager, and the superintendent has to have a fantastic working relationship. There has to be respect that goes both ways. There has to be an appreciation for each other's role in the organization. And if you approach it from that standpoint of, I'm never going to be as smart as the guy out there on the golf course, but I can learn from him every time I ride with him. And so if he rides and shows me something and tells me why something is happening, then it becomes really easy for me to communicate that on his behalf and the club's behalf to the members. So I think having just a really good one-on-one where he or she feels comfortable stepping in the door anytime and say, hey boss, I need to talk to you. And likewise, me feeling comfortable calling him and saying, let's go for a ride.
Well, I think, as well as sometimes the superintendent may not have a general manager that's engaging in that capacity, right? So like based on that knowledge, how would you encourage a superintendent to engage their general manager?
Well, I think it's critical. I mean, you're in the business, so you know the turnover rate in your industry, and it's not too dissimilar in the upper ends of like the general manager or club manager. And the only way we get better is if we find a way to work together, right? And so I think you can learn from each other, and it's critical that superintendent, if he doesn't have a relationship with his manager, ask for the time. It doesn't hurt anything to say, "Hey, boss, can we plan a regular?" If your general manager is not forward enough to already have you set for regular one-on-one meetings with you, then you should ask for it. And I would encourage everybody to ask for it. Just say, "Hey, give me 30 minutes, give me an hour once a month. You put it on your calendar when it works for you, and let me just come tell you what's going on the golf course." And likewise, a good general manager is going to say, "Superintendent, let's talk. Let's ride. Show me." It's one thing for me to ride the golf course and see things, but I'm going to see it from a whole different perspective when I'm riding with him and he's able to tell me the why and the what's.
Yeah, absolutely. And transitioning that thought towards the greens chair relationship or committee-based relationship, Clark, what are your thoughts on that too? Some of the most effective relationships you've seen.
I think Bill touched on, but I would add to that, at least the two places I spent a lot of time working with superintendents, being the country club in Pepper Pike, Ohio, and down at Gulfstream in Florida. I've involved the head professional as well as the general manager, because I think that head professional and that golf shop gets a lot of commentary, like a bank teller almost. And so I think it's important that they work together. I mean, they just hear a lot more stuff than maybe a committee chairman or the superintendent, whose hours perhaps are a little different than a lot of the members. The message that Bill is saying, which I agree with 100%, which I assume most of the people on this call know. I mean, it's communication. I mean, the left hand has to know what the right hand's doing, and it also is communicating not only when things are going well, but when things are not going well, so that they don't. Yeah, and I think that's what Bill was saying, and I agree. And it's up to however the superintendent and the general manager and the head professional want to create their own cadence on that communication, but it's really critical. It's really critical. And I've lived through one that didn't work very well like that, and it just doesn't work. Eventually, the membership will eventually feel it, and the product will suffer.
So that was a follow-up is like, where do you see that breakdown happen? Like, where does it start? And then from a member's perspective, like, when does that start to be noticeable?
I would just like to follow up with what Clark said and just say that, from a superintendent golf pro standpoint, I believe it's critical that the superintendent pass by there every morning. Let them know what's going on the golf course, where it's at. If you build that relationship with your director of golf, your head golf professional, whoever you have on staff, in my mind, that's a more critical relationship than my job with the superintendent, because those two guys have to put the product and the services in place to make the golf course successful. So one is absolutely the pro and the superintendent relationship. Yes.
And I would say, Tyler, where you go to ensure there's not a breakdown. We've just spent probably the better part of, a month, 6 weeks here at Gulfstream creating an updated mission statement that we got input from, obviously, the superintendent, the head professional, kind of a core group of our green committee, both low and high handicapper, male and female members. And then I think what happens is you could take whatever circumstances come along that maybe are off the norm, if you will, and go back to the mission statement. And we've had a little bit of a transformation with our superintendent here after, his third year, and we've really got the golf course where we think the architects intended it to be for playability, for presentation. And, the one thing that none of these guys on here, and I don't know how many are on here because I can only see Bill and Tyler, but I assume there's more than just us, that, they can't control the weather, right? So firm and fast is a lot easier right now in the environment we're in South Florida. We haven't had a lot of rain, but, I just heard the guys at LA, Riviera, talking about how much rain they've got, and they're going to play a pretty soggy golf course at the Genesis this week. So as things get dictated outside the superintendent's control, if you have that communication foundation set, it's easier to, I think, go back to members and membership when things get a little bit out of their control. And the head professional can help with the messaging if you're all aligned, as Bill said, as well as the general manager, I think.
Yeah. So, Clark, I know you know that South Florida's had a little more cooler weather this year than normal. And I think that the Northeast had kind of a rough year last year during the summer. And maybe everybody's golf courses weren't in the perfect condition. Maybe you get a little down to where everything's green in Florida. Maybe it goes a little off color. If you're not communicating and telling your members why, you're way behind.
No, I agree with you. And I'll put a plug in for our guy, Jason. I don't know if he's on this call, but we have a guy who can communicate as well as anybody I've been a part of for 25 or 30 years. And it really helps. So we're not catching up. We talk about what the strategy is or what are some key points maybe for that month. And it really helps some of the members with, I hate talking about golf IQ, but maybe some of the people, it just helps them seeing the pictures. And Jason's a very good communicator. And when things get a little brown or maybe a little faster than people are used to, there's a reason for it. It just really helps. And it can be done on newsletter as well, but we've had a really good strategy in place with a very good communicator.
There you go.
So that brings up, what information do you want from a superintendent and what's just noise? Because I hear that a lot from a lot of my peers, is sometimes just not knowing what's too much and what's too little.
Is that for me? I think everybody's different. I was part of the search with your help, Tyler, for Jason here, as part of the search for Matty when he came to Cleveland. We referenced something yesterday. We have a weekly meeting with the head professional, the superintendent, kind of a subset of our green committee. The current green chairman right now is transitioning to me, and we started to do this, I don't know, a year and a half ago. And it's been really helpful to have meetings when you don't have anything wrong or things are going well. I think everyone's different, though. I think if you had the superintendent on, he'd probably tell you I talk to him too much. So I think it's a two-way street. But I'm a detail guy, and I think it's really important because there are things that you can do that aren't in the budget that are detail-oriented that we talked about up front when we hired both Jason and Maddie at the clubs I was with. I think it again goes to communication and what he's comfortable with, what we're comfortable with. How many green committee meetings are you going to have? What kind of cadence is your membership communication? I think it's all part of the relationship building and then relationship management.
Yeah. So if I just jump in here, I would say that from a committee chairs, we work with co-chairs on our golf and green committee at Quail Ridge, a male and a female, and they both are very good at their jobs, but they both look at different parts of what it takes to be successful, and they come at it from a different way. And so they try to make sure that they're on a call with the superintendent and myself, or the director of agronomy and myself, once a week. And there's sometimes where I just say, you guys just do it. And I don't need to be involved. But then I know it's going to come back to me because of the relationship we have with our director, is he's going to come and share whatever's going on. So it closes that loop. And so it doesn't take everybody all the time to be in the same room, as long as you know that everybody needs to be advised of where you're at. And that there's no surprises. And I think for me, that's the key. It's no surprise management. I don't want a director being necessarily told by a green co-chair to go one way and the other co-chair feels like it needs to go the other way, and I'm being led some different direction by the board. You've got to be on the same page. And I think as long as you work to do that, and going back to Clark's conversation, having a pro involved in that too, I think just makes all the sense in the world. And then make sure you give, make sure if you're not getting it, if you're a superintendent listening, if you don't have a specific regular spot on the agenda for you to give your report, make doggone sure that you've got it, and make sure that you put forward the best report that you can put. In other words, take some time. Don't just come to the meeting unprepared and just ramble. come prepared with a PowerPoint or some presentation, even if it's just on paper, to let everybody know where you're at and what's going on.
I couldn't agree more. The only anecdote I'll tell you, and I don't know how many people know Brian Mabey, but Brian Mabey was the superintendent of Firestone. We lost Matt Schaefer to Marion from Cleveland back in the early 2000s. And then Matt's replacement just didn't work out. Anyway, we ended up hiring Brian Mabey from Firestone in Akron, Ohio, where they had the PGA Tour event every year. Incredible guy. He taught me a lot about agronomy and being a superintendent and the hours that he worked and, the idea of all the skills that you guys have between science and turf and then budget and finance and communication. It's really incredible. But the one thing he would not do, his communication was my communication clerk to the membership is the golf course. And I said, Brian, we're going to have to work on that. And so I have gone from a guy who didn't really like to communicate. His product, as he said, was always the turf and how the golf course was set up based on our direction and input, but with his care. And then I've gone all the way to, I think, one of the greatest communicators that we have. And it's been quite a journey. And I think, Bill, you're spot on. I mean, these golf courses at these facilities have become such important assets, both for recreation, but also for just the financial contribution and health of the club. And I think it's really important that this superintendent community can communicate. It gets the right time at these board meetings and with the membership to talk about just some of the complexities that go into presenting this stage that we like to play on. Some play at a professional level, and most of us played at the club level, but it's really important because everyone's working hard. It's a great place to recreate. And it's important that the superintendents explain some of the complexities and some of the challenges that it takes to present this stage, if you will. So I think it's a really good point.
It's that fine line in communications where you go from informing to making excuses. So it should never, anything you put out never needs to be an excuse. It needs to have a why behind it. And you guys on the call are the most professional people I know. I talk to you guys and you get over my head in a minute in terms of stuff, but just the science that you have to have is just absolutely amazing to me. And just be willing to share it so people understand kind of how we've gotten there with our golf courses.
This is a sidetrack from that, but when things go sideways, right? Whether it's conditioning, whether it's budget, weather, staffing, you called them excuses. Sometimes we like to call it reality. What's builds trust quickly when things do go sideways? And how do you approach that to gain that trust?
From my perspective, it goes back to the communication. You've got to have a plan and you've got to be able to tell members what your plan is to be able to make it better immediately, or if not immediately, what they can expect. I've found in my career that if you tell people that you have a plan and you lay out the plan and you can say, for example, recently an e-blast that came out after the cold spell in Florida where the grass went a little bit off color. Everybody down there is used to seeing green the whole winter long down there, and all of a sudden a little bit off color, and so the current director got ahead of it. He put something out and he explained why it went off color and how Bermuda grass goes dormant and how the weather helps and what the soil temperatures are. And he just went into just enough science to help everybody understand how they were going to get out of what people said is maybe not the best looking golf course right now because it went a little off color because they had 3 days in the 30s down there. So that's not something you normally get.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a lot to add other than you do have to, going back to our monthly communication, we kind of changed. We have a greenish brown hue that we strive for at Gulfstream because we're a seaside golf course. But what happened when that cold snap came, it got the greenish part of the hue went away. People did have a little bit of a catch your breath, but I do think there's a difference, Tyler, between kind of an unforced error and things you can't control, like 3 days in the 30s or lower 40s, right? Then I just think you got to own up to it. If there's a mistake that got caused because of a mower or an employee, or you got to get right on it, like Bill said. And if it's, kind of an unforced error that was done in-house, I mean, people know mistakes are made, but I think this idea of hiding behind something doesn't work, which is probably true in any business. So I've never really had anyone I've worked with not own up to it. I think that's kind of these superintendent communities, pretty proud group of guys. And, when something doesn't work, they tend to own up to it pretty quick. I do think there's a nuance between, I've always had a subcommittee of a green committee. And so there's an outlet for the superintendent to say, hey, this could really go sideways here. How should we get ahead of it? Or I do think it's kind of beneficial to have a smaller group, if you will, that's outside the green committee, that's a trusted group. And we like to meet here every week just so we go over things that come up, And so, but I think Bill's right. You just got to get ahead of it and you got to be honest.
Absolutely.
Two things that you both have talked about here is it sounds like you've created a governance model, right? Even at the green committee level that has helped support that superintendent. How did you get to that point where you had that support? Because not every club is like that. Not every club has those subcommittees or a really well-structured green committee and governance structure. So how did you get to that?
Well, I think the way I got to it started in Cleveland. I lived on the second tee. I was there a lot. I worked in the golf business. We had a long-term pro named Jack McKelvey in Cleveland as well. Jack and Brian were really great. I don't know which one of the guys that I work with. I don't do well in a big group, say 15, 13, 16. There's too many opinions for me. Sorry. So what I like to do, and Brian was teaching me a lot. Jack McKelvey knew a lot. He'd been a long-time PGA professional. So we would tend to meet. I mean, I had a golf cart. We would meet sometimes twice a week. And I think Brian, given his personality, was more comfortable communicating that way. And then Jack and I could communicate to the green committee, and Jack was a wonderful communicator to the membership. Brian didn't communicate at all. In the case in Florida, Mark has been here for 4 decades. He's a good communicator, but Jason really can communicate. I don't know. I've always thought it's really important for the pro and the superintendent to be together. We're not cutting out the GM. It's just, I think those two go hand in glove. And I think and then from there, I would build a green committee. Less is more, maybe 5 people, to be honest. And male, female, high, low handicapper. I mean, I don't think you need many more than that. But at the end of the day, the superintendent and pro knows so much more than I do. And I think it's just important that my role is to keep them communicating on what the playability and what is realistic on delivering conditions to the golf course based on the weather. And then at that time of year, you got to fight for budget. And that's kind of my responsibility to them to make sure we can get what we need, if you will, from the board. So I think it really started with me back when Brian and Jack were there when I was in Cleveland and I lived in such close proximity. And Maddie got away with it because I moved, but Maddie has that going on too.
Yeah. So just to be clear, I mean, we're talking about 2 different types of operation here. And Gulfstream is the 3-legged stool model with a club manager, a golf professional, golf course superintendent, and then there's the chief operating officer, general manager concept where somebody's in charge for everything. And so there are some nuances in both of them. And, and certainly I think in the 3-legged stool, I think the green committee chairman has to be much more involved, has to meet more often, has to meet more regularly. But it does go back to what you said. It's got to be that golf professional superintendent relationship first, and then together they meet with you and you decide where you've got to go from there. On the general manager, chief operating officer side, a little different, bigger club, a lot more moving parts and pieces. And so we had to make sure our governance was right. And so we've got committee charters for every committee, what they're responsible for, how many people can serve on it, what their rotation is, how often they can serve on it, how long they can serve on a committee, to make sure that you don't get somebody that then just stays in place maybe a little too long as a golf committee chair because they want it a certain way. And then he directs the superintendent one way and maybe it doesn't work out well. So we make sure the governance is right. The committee charters are right. And the charters understand what the superintendent or director of agronomy's role, how they roll up and report up and through it. And, with the director of golf back to the GM, but with a dotted line to the committees, which is a little different than what Gulfstream does. And so you just have to figure out what type of club you're at. But the key thing, if you're at a club with a general manager concept, is just make sure there's really good governance procedures, that you've got everything documented, that you can go to any book anywhere and say, okay, what is the committee charter for the Golf and Green Committee, or for the Green Committee, or for the House Committee, or whatever it is? What is it for the finance? What's the board's role? Just really understand. And we operated off of a responsibility matrix that I'm happy to share to Tyler, and he can share it with the group, that clearly outlines who's responsible for what in the organization, who sets policy and direction, who runs operations, who makes what decisions. And it's just a very clear one-page document that allows everybody to understand this is how we operate as an organization. And once you take that guesswork out of it, and you commit it to paper, and everybody agrees to live by it, then it becomes a much easier organization to manage.
Very well stated. And on both sides, whether it's a three-legged stool or the GM COO, one of the things that I think is always a challenge is just how do you, in your role, let's start with you, Mr. Bill, is how do you thread the needle between being overbearing and managing the superintendent?
Well,
I can't wait to hear this one, Bill.
So for me, it's easy. If you spend any time with me, you'll realize the last thing I am is overbearing on anything. But the first thing I am is making sure that everybody does their job and is being held accountable for their job. And so you can be a nice guy and still get the job done. And sometimes you can agree to disagree, all right? But you also, at the end of the day, are responsible to the owners. You're responsible to the members, and the board is charged with that responsibility. So how do you thread the needle? I think it always comes back to communication and that two-way street of, if I did a simple thing with my director of agronomy, it's called keep, start, stop. It's a three things. Keep, start, stop. I'd catch him on the golf course and I'd say, hey, you got time, 2 minutes, keep, start, stop. He said, sure. I said, listen, keep on doing what you're doing. The greens are looking fantastic. The bunkers are looking good. I want you to stop stop pushing everybody so late that you're creating as much overtime as you're doing. Let's find a way around that. And what I want you to start doing is making sure that the cart paths are edged a little more often. Really quick. It's 2 minutes, 2-minute conversation. I really appreciate everything you're doing. Keep up the great job. Go on. That's easy, right? And that builds, and I let them do it with me. And I say, hey, tell me what I should keep doing, what I should stop doing, and what I should start doing. If I'm not doing something to help make you better, let me know. And that's critical.
Stop spending money up in that kitchen. That's what you need to stop doing.
Well, I don't know. You sound like you've got a pretty good golf IQ. I did work in a non-three-legged stool in Cleveland. And when I worked with Brian and Jack, Rob Josie was an incredible operator. He was our GM in Cleveland. But no offense, even if Rob was on, I mean, his golf IQ, he could no longer tell Brian maybe to edge cart pass than maybe my daughter. Sorry. So what I was trying to do was to make sure that Brian and Jack were communicating on what the membership and kind of the people who knew about golf course presentation and preparation could influence. And then they would fill in, Rob. And I do get the overtime and I get the budgeting, but I guess I could never. The only thing I just had to throw my arms up. I have never worked with a GM who could have the ability or the knowledge to kind of influence some of the presentation or the look on the golf course. I do get the people are working too hard. There's too much overtime. I kind of get that analysis. So I have worked in a non-three-legged stool area. I think it's important to make sure that the GM understands what's going on. So when he is asked and they're in their meetings as a staff, that he's not caught off guard. That would be the worst. Just a little nuance.
No, I don't disagree with that. And there are certainly GMs that don't have either the wherewithal or the desire to learn it. And so, having been involved in 7 or 8 new golf projects and reconstruction projects, I've had to learn it. And so you can bet if it's not right, I'm going to put it on the table.
That's good.
We just segued into a topic that I wanted to hit on was project management, right? And there's a lot of money coming into golf course improvements, long range plans, right? So from your perspective, both of you, where do you see the superintendent? What do you think the key things a superintendent needs to be doing through that project to take control, to keep people informed, right? And sort of your experience working with them in that capacity.
I think they've got to own it from start to finish. It's their project. I mean, they need to understand where every bone is buried. Every piece is, I'll just give you a few examples. 2019, we did a renovation of our south course, and we did it at a cost plus, where we were paying for everything as it was coming in. So if we're responsible for everything that's coming in, then we want to make damn sure we've got it controlled. We took a superintendent intern, and his job was to meet every sand truck that brought sand in, to meet every truck that brought a stick of irrigation in, and we counted everything. We monitored everything. And his job was to take those tickets and get them back and report them to the Director of Agronomy. But the Director of Agronomy has to be involved it's the glue. I mean, the guys that are renovating your golf course, they're going to be gone, right? The money's going to be spent. The guy that's charged with taking care of it, he's the one that's going to catch the BS if it's not right. So he has a vested interest in making sure. And I can tell you, like when Josh came to work for us at Quail, I mean, we had already started redoing the North Course. I've never seen a guy get up to speed as quick as that guy and take ownership of it. He would put in a full day. He'd go home. He'd study the plans at night. And that guy just took 200% ownership of it, and couldn't be more proud of the way that it turned out because of his efforts.
Clark, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't have a lot to add. I mean, they've got to be completely up to speed. We did have a little bit of a luxury in Cleveland when Gil came to redo our course. Brian, maybe I mentioned earlier, was set to retire, and I happen to believe that it would be great if we could, and you helped us with that, Tyler, if we could get our new superintendent in and overlap with Brian, so that, as Bill said, Brian could teach Matt where the good bones and bad bones were buried, and kind of give them that whole. And it was a luxury. Our board approved it. We didn't really think it would happen, but I can't speak for Matt. I don't even know if Matt's on the call, but I mean, it really helped Brian. Brian didn't always play nice in the sandbox, but I think he helped a lot. But Bill's right. I don't care how big it was, the full renovation, or it's a bunker project, or it's whatever, that you got to own it, because you're the one who's going to be there when the guy who's doing it goes on to his next project. And you got to own it with your green chairman, your green committee, the board. And it's back to that whole thing. What happens if it goes over budget? Why did it, it's just, I think most of these guys know that. And at least my experience, I've been really emotionally invested and physically invested, because it's kind of cool to redo your golf course, right? Or make changes or upgrade it. So I think Bill pretty much covered it.
Did have a question, and anybody that has stuff want to put in the chat. We want to make sure we save time for that too. But a question came in that, Bill, I think you might be well positioned to answer this. At what point does a superintendent begin maybe to talk about bonuses for project management, or how to engage about bonuses regarding project management? Any thoughts around that?
Well, I'm just going to say, if you're at a good club, you don't even have to have that thought, because a good club is going to make sure they take really good care of you for the work that you've done. And I'll use the North Course that we redid a year and a half, 2 years ago, I guess a little more than 2 years ago now. We had a young man, we moved 70 trees. Of those, about 500 of them were palms, about 130 of them were oaks. And when you're redoing a whole irrigation system, and you're trying to move trees and build berms and get those trees on it before you have irrigation system, and trying to water those things. I had a young assistant that, I don't know how many hours that guy worked a week. probably 100 hours a week, and he made more money that year than he's probably ever made. But he did it because he loved it and he was vested in it. And I made damn sure that when we got to the end of that project, we gave him a one-time bonus for his extra effort on that. Same thing with the Director of Agronomy. When we got to the end of that first year, he had started in April or May, I guess, and our fiscal year ends in September. I gave him a full year bonus plus because of the effort I saw that guy put on that golf course. And, and I didn't give it to him. The members gave it to him, but I went to bat for him to get it. So if you're good at what you do and you're communicating with your boss, whether it's a general manager or whether it's a green committee chair, if they understand what you do, they're going to go to bat for you if you're working for a good one. And if not, Tyler can help you find a good one. How you like that plug?
Yeah, Bill.
Player agent here. That's too funny. So that actually is a great way towards where I think we can end this conversation around is the hiring process of superintendents, right? And so you've both been a part of hiring golf course superintendents. Talk a little bit about what hiring committees are looking for in their agronomy leader today.
Mark, I'm going to let you go first.
Yeah, I think we touched on. I mean, the one thing I would add to this whole knowledge base of science and finance and communication and relationship management is we talked about it yesterday. I mean, the green superintendent at the end of the day is the smartest guy in the room when it comes to agronomy, right? And I think that the relationship with the green superintendent and the green chairman, I want to be his advocate with the membership. I want to be his advocate with the board. Start with the board, then the membership. And, I think debate is healthy about what we can do with a golf course. Because you also have to, I guess what I'm getting at, on top of all these attributes, I'd like to find a guy who believes in himself. I mean, you got to believe in yourself. You got to hire a guy who believes in himself. And that could be said with a GM, Bill, or the head golf professional. I mean, when I was hiring people for my day job, I wanted them to believe in themselves. And I've been really fortunate to work with a bunch of guys who really believe in themselves in the proper way, where they don't have the arrogance and they've got the understanding that they might be the smartest guy in the room, but they have to educate us so we can help advocate for them, because membership composition is tricky. Okay. I mean, it's just tricky. And I just tend to think the more you let people in, the more opinions you get, the more architects you get, the more opinions you get about green speeds or fairway speeds or rough height or whatever. It's a lot of noise. And I think the guys Brian wasn't very good at it because he just ignored everybody. But I mean, today's superintendent, you've got to believe in yourself, and you've got to be able to stick to your core beliefs and what the core mission is of the club. I mean, we've got people coming left, right, and center, and I'm sure Jason doesn't even tell me all the people, but he's got a strong belief in himself and his knowledge. And Maddie is the same way in Cleveland that I work with. I mean, it's just, they're the experts. And I'm a big believer, and I think Bill might be too, based on getting to know him. You hire people and you got to let them do their job.
Get out of their way, right? Yeah, absolutely.
you got to let these guys do, including chirping from the green chairman, by the way. And, I've had plenty of debate with every superintendent I've ever worked with. And, at the end of the day, they know a lot more. I said that at the beginning about the head professional and the superintendent. So I think the answer is they've really you got to believe in yourself.
You do have to believe in yourself, but I think you've got to find a way. If you're going to a room for an interview, you have to make sure that you're extremely well prepared. And I think one of the challenges that I've seen in interviewing directors of agronomy is Tyler brought us 5 guys for our last project that we did Zoom interviews on with first. And I can tell you from the first guy to the last guy, there was a world of difference between how they presented themselves, how they presented their information, and how well they came across to the group. You have to be able to read the room that you're in and know how to speak to that room. And that's the biggest thing. And I've had interviews with guys that came across as professors. And I had interviews with a guy sitting in his truck, leaned to the side, chewing tobacco while he was talking to us. So, and if you're trying to go get that next better job for yourself and your family, then put the same effort into your interview that you put into your everyday work at your golf course.
I want to add a piece to that. Recently, not too long ago, we had a search process and a candidate showed up in his office with a sweatshirt on. And I just thought to myself, if I'm any club official looking at that, so you're going to do an interview for another place of employment, and that's the best that you're bringing to the table. And I tell you, the base standard is a sport coat, and what we're wearing today, that's table stakes. And I think sometimes and we saw that in both of your process at Gulfstream, Quail Ridge, the level of preparedness and presentation, maybe in some cases could be overdone for a person that's going to largely be in the field with their hands, but none of them took it up the chance and made sure their materials from their resume, cover letter, a portfolio, how they dressed, their follow-up communication with, whether it be the committee, general manager, director of golf, was really buttoned up and on point.
Yeah, I would just add, if we're talking about interviews, at least the last two guys I hired, not only were they buttoned up, but they had passion. They wanted to be there. They wanted the job. But both of them asked for the order. We could talk about how you get hired. That's a whole different Zoom probably. But I'm telling you, the guy in Cleveland, I don't know if he's on, but finally tell him he was the only guy who asked for the order.
That's fantastic.
He may have gotten coached by somebody. We won't name who, but the last two guys I hired had passion. You could feel how much they wanted the job and how they could contribute and make a difference in our club.
And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day, is making a difference where you go next. Because if you can make a difference for your club, you can make a difference for your own life.
Right. Yeah. And it's been great. So if I got to give Tyler the kudos, I'll give it to you reluctantly, but I'm going to give it to Matt and Jason. Sorry.
Here's a question that I hear a lot. And again, it's probably different at every club, but a lot of times candidates will ask me the importance of pedigree, right? And the importance of working at great facilities. And if you're somebody that maybe not working at a place with that, how do you overcome that?
Did you repeat the question for me?
Yeah. How do you if you're a candidate that maybe doesn't come from a club with a, large pedigree, reputation in the market, how do you overcome that in an interview setting or if in a job search process?
So I think you overcome it by your personal reputation. Maybe you're not at the best club, but maybe you're doing more at that club with less than any club around you, and you're keeping that golf course better. And everybody's saying XYZ club has the best greens. It's in the best condition. It's in this, it's that. Although it may not have the name of the club down the street. That word is going to get around. And as soon as somebody starts talking to their friends at those clubs, it's going to get around. I mean, you're never going to get your next job unless you take care of your current job, right? You've got to be the best at your current job in order to get your next job.
I think it's a really good question, Tyler. I think in today's world, part of it is the hiring club responsibility. I mean, I'm just trying to gather. I mean, what happens is there's this artificial bias, right? Based on the perception of said club.
Right.
And my bias versus, Bob's bias versus Labe's bias versus Jay's bias, they're all different. We all think great clubs are great clubs, but they're all different. And, we started on Zoom with you, probably on both cases, if I recall. We've got to get these guys in there. You have got to get in the room, guys. And as Bill said, kind of sell yourself. And there's a story. There's a story behind, I've kind of leaned like, I got to watch my what I'm going to say. I'd rather have a guy who, just because he's an assistant at a top 10 club doesn't mean he's a top assistant. He might be. He very well could be. But just because he's club number 3 in the rankings, which is probably this awesome club that's got an awesome budget, that doesn't mean that Joe could be an awesome superintendent. I mean, it might, but also doesn't mean that Bill, who's in a club that's not ranked in the top 100, can't be a great superintendent. So I think it's a really good, it's a membership education as well. And we talked about it, Tyler. I don't know where, Ohio or Florida, I can't remember which, but there's membership bias as well. I mean, forget the hiring committee. So I think Bill covered it, but it is definitely an issue in the hiring process.
It definitely is certainly a bias there. And, I would say to you that if you're looking for that job, make sure you're well connected in your industry. Don't be that guy that stays on your own island and doesn't call anybody for help, because you never know you never know when a guy like Clark is going to call a buddy at a club near your club and say, what do you know about this guy? And if you're on your own island, if you're not dialed in with the other supers and directors, and if you're not giving back to your organization and people don't see you as a guy who's ready for that next step, a guy like Tyler is going to call a half a dozen guys around the country and say, what do you think about this guy? And if they don't know you, then you're probably not going to get that chance for the next step. So you need to make sure you're networking and that you're out there and you're engaged.
Well, I think specifically, if you can get some good reference letters from people, I mean, without naming names, the guy we hired in Cleveland had one of the best recommendation letters we'd ever read. In fact, it was so good we had to verify it.
That's pretty funny.
We went to a couple others, and they all said the same thing. So I think you're right, Bill. It's not just where you are, but what's your network look like? What if we're going to check on some of your references and make sure that they're all kind of in order, and you might have one stronger than the other, and that's okay. But it's a small community, and Tyler, thankfully, I think makes it smaller for all of us in our hiring process, which is really helpful.
Yeah, so I'll just give you one quick story. My immediate past president of the club that I just retired from is a former president of Secession Golf Club. He's also past president of the Virginia State Golf Association, and so well connected in the industry, well liked and well known. But one of his best friends is the director of agronomy at Secession that he helped hire. You can bet your butt when somebody applies for the job at Quail Ridge, he's going to call his friend at Secession and say, what do you know about this guy? Right? And so just know that's out there, and that's why I just say, if you're out there, don't do it alone. Get involved in the Superintendents Association. Continue networking. Networking is the most valuable thing that I could ever say to you in terms of knowing your fellow superintendents and directors around the country. After 40 years, I can pick up the phone and call just about any club in the country, and somebody's going to pick up the phone and talk to me. So that wasn't built through just a few years or a few meetings. That's built through time.
I know Jeff Corcoran's on this call, and Jeff's off screen, but I remember him saying in an education program like this that we were involved with that, the difference of potentially getting in the door or not is one relationship. One relationship can open doors, that no matter what background, what your resume is, whatever that is, that one relationship can really open that door. Last question on this, on the hiring side, is there any both differentiators that you both saw in candidates, right? And you've hit on some of those things here. It could be references, could be passion, right? But are there any other differentiators for those candidates that you noticed, and any red flags that you may have noticed as well that disqualified somebody from a job?
Gosh, differentiators for us is how you handle yourself in the room. It's one thing to be on a Zoom interview, but you can't see body language as much on a Zoom interview. You can't really determine full personality on a Zoom interview. When you have the person in front of you and you take them on a golf course for a ride around and you get them talking about what they're passionate about on the golf course, you're going to learn so much. It really comes down to, You've just got to present yourself well in the room. You've got to understand, research that club, know that club, understand why you want that job, and be able to answer the question why you want that job other than just because it's for more money. You've got to be going there because it's where you want to be. And then you're going to have a passion for it, as Clark says.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, Tyler, I'd ask you, are we missing something? I mean, we talked a lot about, you've been doing this, you're in more interview rooms than I am now. I'll throw it back to you, actually. I mean, have we missed something? Because I think we've talked about how important being prepared and passion and all that is, and I think it's really important.
You got to it's hard to be yourself sometimes because you're trying to win the job, right? And I find that in every one of these searches, the person that typically stands out is the person who's just genuinely themselves from start to finish. And the things that I hear about that candidate from a reference or off the record is typically consistent with what I hear in a phone call, a Zoom interview, all the way through the process. So you can't be somebody you're not. You need to just be who you are and be the best version of that. And don't be afraid to tell that story, right? And if it's not the right fit for you, typically that, it works both ways. You're interviewing the club as much as they're interviewing you. So, I mean, that seems to be a differentiator. And I think, sounds probably cliche or very basic, but I see now as a process unfolds, the person that's got the right exposure and they've got the right confidence, it just comes out that they're the expert because of their exposure, because of their experience. So as you're thinking about your career steps, make sure you're going to places that are going to get you exposed to project management, that are going to get you involved in green committee meetings, that are going to get you involved and not just filling out tasks, but you're actually exposed to things beyond just what's right in front of you. Because when you can speak on that pretty confidently, it shows in an interview and the committee feels it. I mean, the committees are pretty much in sync by the end to say, we're talking to a master, not somebody who's trying to become the master. They already are the master of what they're doing.
Yeah.
This was a question that came in and probably Bill, you're a little bit more exposed to this than maybe Clark. How important is titles as it relates to, getting a job, whether it be a senior assistant, course superintendent under a director, how much do committees evaluate that? I'll let you answer first because I have my own perspective.
Yeah. So I personally have never got hung up on titles at all. It doesn't matter to me as long as you're ready for that next step. It does sometimes in a committee matter to some of them. They want to know that you've been the number one guy at that club, or they want to know that the club you're coming from, that director is giving you enough so that you can step into this role and they feel assured that you're going to be able to do it. And so, but I don't put a whole lot on whether you're a director of agronomy or a superintendent or a head superintendent. Call me. I tell people that all the time. They'd say, "What is your title?" I said, "Just call me Bill." It's just, I'm just here to help, right?
Clark, any comments on that from your perspective?
No, I've shied away from this whole director of golf and director of agronomy and green superintendent. And I mean, I'm with Bill. There seemed to be some movement afoot in the industry to change people's titles, but not change their responsibilities. I didn't really pay any attention to it. And I think the only thing I said that, I think if your tenure is 20, 30 years, I don't really have an answer for it, to be. I go back and forth, and I'm much more aligned with Bill that I want to hire somebody to do the job that we're asking them to do, and we'll come up with a comfortable title that we both parties can agree on.
Right.
Anyway.
I'll give you a couple examples of where I think what I'm seeing is title inflation, and people are taking because they feel like that's going to position them at a higher level. But when you go through an interview process, you're going to get exposed if you don't have the experiences and the true responsibilities. Committees are smart. GMs are smart. They're going to do their research, and you get put in a position then when you're saying that I'm a golf course superintendent, but really you have no oversight of budget. You have no oversight of day-to-day scheduling, agronomic programs. And now you get exposed in an interview that travels. because I've seen that happen where committee members will call a nearby club that, just after their search process is now their nearby club's doing a process, and they get the same resume, and they're asking the club officials at the local club, hey, did you get this person that says they're the golf course superintendent at XYZ club? Now, on the flip side of that, what I've seen is the evolution of the role of the superintendent, and where they're taking on more facilities management, they're taking on more project management, and it's not just the day-to-day of managing the golf course. But I think that's a level that the club is deciding on to say, hey, we're elevating this position because it is beyond just the golf course, right? And so now, consequently, that trickles down to the senior assistant might be the day-to-day golf course superintendent. So, and I think that that's changing, and every club is different, but I just want to make sure that people aren't like overinflating their titles because they think that's going to give them an added advantage in an interview process. Any thoughts on that?
No, well said. I think you're right on with it. Absolutely. I think that if you're the right fit at the right club, people are going to continue to give you more responsibility, and they're going to give you whatever title you want if you're the right guy, just to keep you there. Nobody should get hung up with about a title. It's meaningless in my world.
Another question came in is, what are you seeing for examples of type of materials in a portfolio for an interview, and what's best received by the hiring committee? And I'll get to the follow-up question to that. I don't know. I can take the lead on that, or if you guys have thoughts on a portfolio.
I think we'd like to see you take the lead. You've got to be seeing it.
Yeah.
I'm with Bill. I'm going back on mute.
So I think first and foremost, you got to pay attention to what the instructions are in the actual job advertisement, whether it's, Bloom Golf Partners or any of the other search firms, or an individual hiring committee is pretty much going to lay out what their expectations are. And if they specifically say, don't include a portfolio, don't include a portfolio. If they don't say that, it is your added advantage to go win the job. And I would send a portfolio, because most resumes and cover letters that we see, specifically as it relates to superintendent roles, they're all very similar. You're going to see similar experiences, tenure, kind of club demographics, right? So I think anything that can like differentiate visually how that looks, I think is an advantage for some. Now, what we often find is you get a resume cover letter that is formatted completely different than a portfolio, and it looks messy. So visually, there's lack of attention to detail from the outset. So I think just being consistent in the formatting of how that portfolio is sent, so it's easy to read. For most hiring committees don't have time to look through 20, 30 pages of a portfolio. They got a minute, and they're going to zip through everything as quickly as possible. I think as it relates to the type of things that I would put in a portfolio, certainly I would say if a club is looking for a project management and they've got an upcoming project, well, probably a good idea to show before after photos and what your responsibilities were, at your current facility. If the club is looking to host a tournament of some event, being able to show how you prepared for a USGA event, a PGA event, probably going to be well received. It's crystal clear to me though right now that clubs are looking for leadership. So things that I've seen is like behavioral reports, or your personality assessment, how you build your team, how you build a great workplace culture. I mean, I think that buzzword right now in workplace culture is pretty much top of mind for every GM that we engage with. So those are some examples that I think could be packaged in a portfolio. And again, I think the other thing as we think about applications is there's also a time and place when those are more impactful. So you don't want to show all your cards sometimes at the start of a process. It's okay to lace and leverage those things, whether it's a reference or a portfolio, at different points in the process to kind of keep that narrative moving, along the process. So those are pretty high level thoughts. And Bill, I don't know if you have any other comments.
I think you're dead on. I can't tell you how many portfolios I've seen where somebody's talking to me or talking about the aerification process. Well, everybody does verification. I'd much rather know what you're doing in terms of project management, before and after photos, or anything like that you've done. You just got to assume that you have the knowledge that everybody walking in the door that you're going to bring to us, or anybody else is going to bring to them, has the base knowledge of how to take care of a golf course. It's just show your differentials. Right? Show what makes you different, what makes you stand out, and how you can, even probably more importantly, how you think what you've done in your past translates to help this club that you're looking at.
Yeah, another thing on that too that I was just thinking as you were talking is attention to detail. I don't know a committee that I've worked with that attention to detail isn't top of mind outside of the leadership component. So being able to show examples of what that looks like in your operation could be something as simple as showing what your SOPs are, could be examples of the detail work around course setup, whether that's T locations, whether that's using the easy locator, however you handle sort of course presentations. That's pretty consistent on every committee that I work with is attention to detail. Here's another question that came in. Favorite book on leadership or hospitality?
My favorite book on hospitality right now is Unreasonable Hospitality. Will Gardell, I think I butchered his last name, but fantastic. Really good read.
Clark, any takes?
On hospitality? No, I just read Admiral McRaven's book about the U.S., his time in the U.S. military, called Sea Stories, SEA Stories, his experience in the military as a Navy SEAL and his leadership. He's the guy who talked about making your bed. He was the chancellor of the University of Texas. He's an incredible guy who serves his country. That's my most recent, and I wasn't thinking about novels when I got on this call, to be honest. So, I see those worth the read. Sea Stories is worth the read.
Well, I love seeing the Quality Pro website and what they've done. I like to read up on the latest materials and products.
Yeah.
But Bill, to your point, I got to meet Will back in September at an event and was thoroughly impressed with Unreasonable Hospitality. So anybody that's listening here and how to make an impact by doing the small things, it's usually not these big aha moments. It's the small little details. And those are the things that get people hired. And that's what makes a difference in a hiring process, is not missing those little details and how you make people feel.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you all. Thanks for having me. Tyler, thanks.
Absolutely.
Take care, bud.
Yep, we'll see you soon.
Take care, guys.
You get down here, call me.
I will.
Okay.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Leadership on the Links. For more leadership insights and industry expertise, connect with us at bloomgolfpartners.com or follow us on social media sites LinkedIn and Instagram. If you enjoyed this episode of Leadership on the Links, we'd be thrilled if you'd leave a review or share it with someone who you know would get some value. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to stay updated. Thanks for joining us today.